That's why there's been a lot of mistrust in establishment media over that has kind of occurred over the course of many decades. I started the Green Line, which is a hyper-local neighborhood community-driven news outlet 3 years ago in April 2022. 75% of our audience are Gen Z and millennials, so they're like about 18 to 40-year-olds. So it's something that's really alarming because you see the transition from Obama era to Trump era, and it's like night and day in terms of press freedoms, right? I would urge the public to invest in local news. It provides financial support to publications that you really believe are doing good work that uphold democracy.
Welcome to Behind the Veil, a video podcast powered by American Muslim Today. Today we're joined by Anita Li, founder and CEO of The Green Line, a Toronto-based community-driven, solutions-focused news outlet. She also created The Other Wave, a newsletter challenging the status quo in Canadian journalism, and serves as journalism innovator in residence at Toronto Metropolitan University. Anita has over 20 years of experience across Canadian legacy media and U.S. digital media, and she focuses on inclusive audience-first journalism that strengthens democratic engagement. She also co-founded Canadian Journalists of Color and serves on boards including Lion Publishers and ONA. Thank you for joining us today. So my first question is about you and your advocacy for diversity and inclusion in journalism. However, some critics argue that focusing on representation can possibly compromise objectivity. Can you tell us how you balance these priorities?
I wrote a newsletter. My newsletter, I have a B2B newsletter that goes to industry leaders called The Other Wave, and I wrote about this idea of objectivity and ethics recently. To me, there is objectivity in news in terms of the news gathering approach, not in terms of like an omniscient, like all-knowing person, or this idea that you can be completely objective as a human being, because obviously we have biases. We all have biases. So for my understanding of objectivity is being really rigorous with, your approach to gathering the news, making sure that you consult a diversity of sources with many different perspectives and different backgrounds, being rigorous in your fact checking. So we're talking about representation in your newsroom. I'm somebody who doesn't only, define herself as a Chinese Canadian person or only define herself as a woman. All of those are important facets of my identity. I'm also somebody, who grew up in a working class neighborhood, in a middle class household. So when I say diversity, it includes diversity in terms of identity markers, but also geographic markers. But it is really important to have a range of people that represent all sorts of different perspectives and lived experiences in the newsroom.
Yeah, and a lot of your work emphasizes on digital innovation. However, with misinformation rampant online, how can outlets like The Green Line remain credible while experimenting with these new formats?
So what's interesting about The Green Line is, I'll just parse what you said, because you said remain credible, and I think that's definitely something that more long-standing establishment and legacy news outlets have to grapple with. That's why there's been a lot of mistrust in establishment media over that has kind of occurred over the course of many decades, and it's kind of come to a head in the last maybe 10 years. So I started The Green Line, which is a hyper-local neighborhood community-driven news outlet 3 years ago in April 2022, and it was actually in response to a lot of what was happening with legacy and establishment media and in terms of their practices, right? So it was very much like producing it in a particular format, newspaper or digital media. But with The Green Line, what we do is we consult communities on their information needs, and then we address those information needs in story formats, tools, and guide formats. So it's like basically evergreen journalism that you can kind of tap into at any point that helps you live your life in the city and navigate life in the city. The innovative formats come because 75% of our audience are Gen Z and millennials. So they're like about 18 to 40-year-olds. So visual appeal really matters. We're also really conversational. But the way I mitigate against any sort of criticism is we're very rigorous in our news gathering approach. And I would say we actually use an objective method to gather news, like I mentioned earlier.
Right. And I would like to ask you, as you're a Canadian journalist,
Yeah.
but you're, right next to us geographically. Uh,
Yeah.
what have been your thoughts on, the recent kind of crackdowns on what seems to be free speech? I mean, I'm sure you saw the news with Jimmy Kimmel being pulled off air and then allowed to come back on, and even the White House removing sources like the AP from the Oval Office.
Yeah. So it's really appalling and alarming. I like to see what's happening south of the border. Even though I'm a Canadian journalist, a lot of my career was actually with American publications. So I worked at a publication called Mashable, which is a tech-focused publication. I worked at a place called Fusion, which doesn't exist anymore, but it was like very diversity-focused journalism. And part of the reason why I went to the States was because I really didn't see a lot of justice-oriented journalism that covered issues of race relations in Canada. And that's actually why I went to the States, because I was like, oh, people understand that this is important. I have a lot of friends in the US as well, so I'm really close to it, not just like geographically as a Canadian. So it's something that's really alarming, because you see the transition from Obama era to Trump era, and it's like night and day in terms of press freedoms, right? And I don't need to tell your audience, I'm sure they know and you know that, I mean, one of the pillars of democracy is press freedom, right? So it's been really alarming, because people are saying this already, like it's very clear that it's not like it's just arrived, like the US government is very authoritarian. And it's dictatorial. And so a lot of the stuff that we're seeing with the crackdowns on, like you're saying, AP, removing reputable publications' access to the White House, basically being really punitive when somebody says something that they have a right to say. And especially in the case of Jimmy Kimmel, he's a comedian. Like, it's par for the course for figures like that to joke about every administration. I'm sure Jimmy Kimmel had jokes about, Obama as well. That is all part of a functioning, healthy democracy.
Yes, and last question here, just looking ahead, how do you think organizations like the Green Line will, help kind of change this media landscape where, we're kind of going from legacy to something new, something online, right? How do you think this will affect news in the future?
Yeah, I wouldn't even say that it's going online, because a lot of legacy and even a lot of like very disreputable publications, like Breitbart, Fox News, or in Canada's Rebel News, like, are digital and actually quite savvy when it comes to the way they present in terms of formats. Like, I wouldn't even want to mention places like the CBC or NPR or New York Times in the same breath as those publications, because they're not news. This is why so many people are turning away from the news, because they see a lot of that stuff that's like really conflict driven. Publications like the Green Line are addressing this is through things like solutions journalism. It's really about reporting on existing solutions to systemic problems. So for me, the first point of the first path towards resistance and to resistance against misinformation is local journalism. So I would urge the public to invest in local news. It provides financial support to publications that you really believe are doing good work that uphold democracy. How do we connect people? How do we set the table for conversation, for better dialogue, right? So that's really what I see the future of news as being.
All right, well, Anita, that's all the questions I have for you today. Thank you again for joining us. Would you like to tell the people where they might find you or your work?
Yeah, for sure. So I run a publication called The Green Line, and the way I describe its mission is that it investigates the way we live to help Torontonians survive and thrive in a rapidly changing city. We're known for something called an action journey model, which takes people through like a 4-step process to addressing their problems in their neighborhoods and in their cities. So if you want to learn more about it, you can go to thegreenline.to, which is our website. You can also find us at The Green Line TO on YouTube. please subscribe. I encourage you to it.
That's it for now. Thank you for joining me on Behind the Veil. If you value our public service journalism, please support American Muslim Today, a 501c3 nonprofit, by following us on social media at American Muslim Today or donating at AmericanMuslimToday.com. Before you go, don't forget to hit that subscribe button.